Hello and welcome to The Habit Architect. My name is Michael Cups. I'm glad you're here to see us. I'm excited about our guest today. She's somebody I've worked with for a number of years, and she's doing something really exciting and really impactful, in my opinion. And so we're going to dig into all of that, and you'll get to know Cathy along the way. But first, I just want to mention, if you're watching this on LinkedIn, thank you. Be sure to comment and do the likes, and I think you're going to hit the love button when you hear Cathy's story. But also, the if you're on Spotify, please subscribe or follow. If you're on YouTube, subscribe or follow. It just helps us make the show sustainable and last longer and find new guests. So
Okay.
thank you for all of that. Again, wherever you watch it, just do some loyalty things for us. So Cathy, wonderful to
Awesome.
see you on
Yeah,
the
Michael.
Girls' Day weekend. How are you?
I know. I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on today. I'm really looking forward to our discussion, and it's great to have reconnected with you more recently after working together, right?
Yeah.
Back probably almost 10 years ago, right? 10,
Y-
15 years ago.
Yeah, something like that. And I think the last time we actually probably saw each other physically, we were in the Netherlands, I would bet.
I think
Face
so. I know.
So anyway, well, why don't we start with who you are and your journey to wisdom, where you are today, and we're going to talk a lot more about that wisdom. But tell us your story and how you got there.
Yeah, so thanks. And I know we share some similar background. I have been in sort of enterprise software and technology since sort of the early 90s. I've worked at some kind of spent my career. I'm mostly the go-to-market side, although more recently picked up more of the operations marketing and a lot of the post-sale customer success, but really focused on the customer always and solving problems for customers. And that's sort of the core of it. And worked at some big companies, some exciting times at Oracle and SAP and then Cordis. And I made a jump into about 2008. And actually, Cordis was my first sort of startup. Now I'm on my fifth startup, but really getting into sort of emerging tech and utilizing new technologies to solve different types of problems. And it's really run the gamut from sort of the business operations platform that we worked on to I did spend 7 years as the first sort of go-to-market employee at a company called Spacetime, which was an IoT and AI company, more on the industrial side, but a lot of the machine learning and data science that we were working on then was pretty revolutionary, and it was also a baseline I'll talk about for what we're doing at Wisdom now.
Yeah.
I then spent a couple of years in a blockchain company as the chief revenue officer at a distributed ledger. So I've been a glutton for punishment in terms of going for sort of bleeding edge technology. But yeah, and really excited to tell you a little bit more about Wisdom.
Yeah, me too. I think, and that's interesting, the IoT reference and the blockchain as well. I don't think blockchain's in your latest venture, but it's interesting because it's popping back up now as a possible replacement for Swift, even which would be,
Right.
I think, welcome. So bleeding edge technology. You're also a mother of two. You're busy. You've got a busy lifestyle for yourself. I think I may have seen a graduation on your LinkedIn at
Yeah.
something like that. So yeah, that's exciting times.
Yeah, I have. I mean, it's having raised two kids and worked. I mean, there were definitely moments where it was like, a little bit of a pulling your hair out, but you get through those years. I now have two kids. That was my last college graduation. So I have both of them living in New York and they'll be working. And
Yeah.
it allowed me sort of the ability to jump into starting my own company, which is something I always wanted to do. But,
Yep.
as an entrepreneur, it's a 24/7 endeavor, and you just have to be able to put everything into it. And so I felt like it was the right time to do that. And it's funny just talking about some women starting companies after, you know, kind of when you finished
Yeah.
your sort of normal career. It's a really great time to actually start companies, and a lot of successful women entrepreneurs over 50 because you're very focused and you have the time to put forward. So yeah.
And you have a lot of wisdom because you've done quite a bit already. So yeah. So let's talk about wisdom for just a minute because I think it's important. Normally we talk about it towards the end of the show, but I think it's important that we talk about the tech and what you're doing earlier. So aging in place is what we're talking about here. So tell us a little bit about wisdom, how you arrived that this is something that needs to be solved, and a little bit about the tech.
Yeah, so just in terms of the driver, when I was traveling, I was driving globally, for my, last company, when I was at R3, and my father, got in a car accident and was diagnosed with cancer, and it was a very quick situation for him. He declined very quickly, and before, we really kind of wrapped our heads around it as a family, and my mom, he had passed away, and my parents had lived in the same house they lived in for 55 years in New Jersey, and I just noticed my mom my as I was traveling, I couldn't really check in. I didn't know how she was doing.
Yeah.
Her phone wasn't working. There's like all these challenges with technology. And I started looking in the market and I was like, there's just got to be a better way. My sister was in California, one was in Atlanta. We just didn't have a good grasp as to what was happening. And I started doing some research, realizing, there's just a lot of people have tried this, but there hasn't really been a breakthrough company yet that's sort of ability to provide a solution in the home for someone who's independent, wants to stay, and just has made that decision. I am staying in my home, right? But and there's a lot of things to consider in sort of that decision. But how is there some technology to help, number one, use technology more effectively, and two, stay safer and more independent? And that was really where Wisdom was born. And the name Wisdom was very intentional because I feel as though we're all going to be there soon, but there's incredible ageism in the marketing and messaging for this demographic, and not very empowering either. And it's also a problem that impacts a lot of women. So, 75% of women will be solo agers at some point. There's a little bit more vulnerability, when living alone. So it was, how do I take a nod to the wisdom that you get as you get older, right? And
Yep.
sort of how to just enable that. So
Yeah.
that was sort of the concept for the solution. What it is, it's a smart home system. So and it's leveraging. We've had the advantage on a number of levels, both from the technology and the unit economics of building Wisdom, of benefiting from the massive advancements in computer processing and AI technology after COVID. So
Yeah.
it's an edge computing application. So we set up a private network in the home. We have a GPU that's actually put in the home, an NVIDIA GPU. We're using a combination of optical and radar sensors, as well as other smart home automation extensions, to really understand the patterns of behavior in the home,
Yeah.
what's kind of normal, what's not normal, so that you could start to understand trends for potentially some issues with an older adult living at home. And then really the secret sauce is our ability to detect falls and do fall prediction without reliance on any wearable. So the wearables market, the PERS market, the watches,
Yeah.
although, if you wear them, they can be effective, but 80% of people don't wear them, and they're not wearing them when 90% of falls happen. So
Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting. And I asked you two questions and you answered them gracefully. Thank
yeah,
you. So the I want to go back because I get where you are, and the challenge and the concern you had. My parents, excuse me, my parents are getting up there in age, but I'm thankfully they're both with us, and they live on a lake in East Texas, and they at one point they did go look at assisted living home, or adult
right.
community, and both of them decided they just weren't ready for that. They still wanted to be
Hmm.
home. They wanted to be where they were. They have their life, and it's a good life, so they don't want to miss out on those opportunities to wake up and watch the sun come up over the lake, or whatever it may be that they like doing, feeding the ducks, or whatever.
Right.
And so I get this. People want to stay where their home is, not kind of get up and displace there. So I think it's an incredible opportunity for people to reconsider, how they age and
Yeah.
how they get there. So the tech, you said, it's kind of this non-intrusive way of watching routines, and can you just explain that a little bit? So,
Yeah.
you think smart home and you think, okay, is this thing watching me everywhere I go? What,
Right.
so
Yeah, and that's a great question. And just to kind of go back to the data on the aging in place market, um, I mean, there's going to be, I mean, the population over 65 is growing enormously. 11,000 people a day are turning 65. And by 2030, there's going to be 70 million older adults in the United States over 65. And the stats are pretty clear that 90% of the 70 million have expressed a desire to stay in their home if possible, right? Or extend their ability to stay at home. Maybe there's a point where they have to maybe move to some kind of assisted living, but the longer they can stay in their home for those emotional reasons and financial. Um, Senior living and the assisted living is only 3% of the population. And
Yep.
the costs, I mean, not only the emotional staying in the house, but it's enormously expensive in the United States. It's over the average, I think. I mean, if you're in the metropolitan area like a city, it's like $10,000 a month. Maybe the average would be about 6 or 7, but it's unaffordable. So what are the options if you can't do that and you want to stay home? So it's really this just huge bubbling issue.
Yeah.
So the first thing we did with Wisdom was we ran market research. We did a bunch of surveys and we ran a bunch of focus groups with older adults. And there was a few themes that came through loud and clear. And the first was privacy and dignity,
Yeah.
right? How, if I have something the I've fallen and I can't get up is the definition of a stigma in terms of how they're treated with that. They also, can give up. There's some element of giving some privacy up in return for independence, but it's a very thin line. So how do you construct a system that enables privacy and granular levels of security and control so that they feel comfortable that there's enough information to keep them safe and understand how the information can help them be healthier? But at the flip side, how do they maintain their dignity and privacy in their own homes? And a lot of the solutions that are on the market either kind of, aren't effective. Like, okay, you have a wearable that you're not wearing, right? Or they are solutions that are really only targeted to the family caregivers and their monitoring devices. It's very much like we're going to come in and monitor, and it's sometimes at a point that's much later in the need cycle. So like if someone's
Yep.
coming back from the hospital, they really first is just your everyday search system that keeps you healthy. So that is the certain core values of Wisdom, and the name Wisdom. So
Yep.
our solution is based on edge computing. And
Yep.
edge computing is where all the processing of your data is in your home on a device, on an NVIDIA device, which we put in called the Home Hub. So
Yep.
all the information is processed on the Home Hub. That is private data. It's encrypted and it's your data. So I sometimes explain it to our focus groups as the old tape cassette recorders of the 80s, right? You had your box of tapes, but like that's your information that you own, and it never leaves the house to go to the cloud. So there's no cloud processing.
Yeah.
People have to tunnel into the house to get any type of view of that information. And you, as the older adult or that family member, set a very detailed, granular level of privacy controls. And what I mean by that is, for example, if you had an optical sensor, which basically does like a digital representation of a room, like pixels, or a radar device, which kind of also provides sort of a skeletal sort of optical framework for the fall detection. So you actually can tell the difference between different humans, a pet, a lamp, right? So it's really advanced technology. That's why it's more effective, right, than a motion sensor or some of the other types of technology that use sound, right? Only sound or motion. So it's constantly running and it's not storing any data ever. It's just running. If there's an event, it will store 15 seconds before and 15 seconds after, and it'll evaluate that event as to whether it's an important event that someone should know about. If it is, it will allow, we have an app with a trusted circle, that person to, during that event, get some type of visibility into the event,
Yeah.
and then have the decision to escalate it to a third party. So if there's a fall, so from the older adult, it's like, look, 24, most of the time, nothing, you're just understanding the anomalies, right, for yourself. But if something happens, you won't be laying on the floor for a day, 2 days. Someone will be able to come in. There's two-way audio. So at that point, if an event happens, a two-way audio device will activate, and you can have people in your trusted circle, and each trusted circle member has privileges and security that's set up down to the actual sensor level. So you could say, in the kitchen, my daughter can see, these alerts this time of day. So we've tried to make it incredibly customizable,
Yep.
and so that you can set up what works for you. And that's been we think that's a huge differentiator, because
Sure.
everyone is different. And a 65, 70-year-old is different preferences than an 80, 85, 90-year-old. And we want wisdom to be a system that can grow with your needs.
Yeah.
So it might be quite private and locked down at 70, and it's just for really like level 1 emergency. But maybe when you're 85, if you've potentially maybe returned from rehab, there's a caregiver that comes in, maybe there's more visibility there. So
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's, I think it's important to say again that it's not a camera in every room necessarily
No.
watching, right? It's a sensor, and that sometimes is difficult. But I do want to say what a difference a Ring doorbell makes for people, right? And they, if you think about it, a lot of people were just wondering who's ringing their doorbell initially,
right.
but now it has such a different. It's an awareness technique,
Right.
right? And so now that one has a camera, yours doesn't, but the point is the same. The amount of assurances you can have, I think, with the Ring doorbell, you're kind of, that same thing applies, and that's what I want to get to. So let's take the perspective. That's a little bit of the perspective of the person living in the home. What about the caregiver, or the daughter, the son, the whoever it is that's kind of checking in on them from time to time, or daily, or whatever that frequency may be. What can they expect, and what does that do for them?
Right. So a lot of our discussions with caregivers, myself being one of them, and a lot of folks on our staff are also caregivers. Look, people are really busy. I mean, you hear the term the sandwich generation. You're working in some respects, you've got other responsibilities, you have your own kids, and you're also caring for an older adult parent in many cases. And some of the existing solutions either don't give enough information, or this overload, right? What Wisdom provides is a mobile application. So you go and you download the My Wisdom app. You set up, you get invited into the system, and you set up a profile. And there's just certain settings that you can set up to say how much, during the day, what type of alerts, what type of things do you want to know about? In general, we're just really providing anomalies. So if everything's good to go, you might just get a morning like, hey, everything's running, everything's great, go have a great day. And you're not thinking about having to go check the system, because a lot of the other ones are like even if you had the DIY, a lot of people do the DIY, do it yourself, and they'll set up cameras or you're having to decide to go look, right? And if you're in a meeting or something like that, where you forget, something could have happened. So this is about producing when you need to know something, you will know something. Otherwise, you can have peace of mind that everything's okay. Over time, there's going to be some things that we are going to build into the software around routines. And that's, I know, something we'll talk about later for, motion, activity, balance, fall. I mean, the number one reason why someone has to leave their home is a fall. So I know falls are something, but that is the number one reason someone loses their independence. So we really focus on the physical safety and wellness, and preventing, helping to provide some of the data and activities to prevent falls. And then if a fall happens, to quickly get help. Because if you are on the floor after a fall more than an hour and you're over 65, your chance of dying within 6 months goes up by 50%. Like, you need to get immediate help for head injuries, hip, whatever that is. So how do you how do you have that peace of mind that if there's a fall, that there's a triaging effect that happens?
Yeah.
One of the things we heard was with the Apple Watch is a great product. It was certainly something we would integrate with in the future. But that sometimes will go directly to EMS, right? So the false positives and having an ambulance kind of show up, break the door down,
Yeah.
it, it prevents people from continuing to wear those very useful devices. So with wisdom, there's sort of a triage. So are you
Yep.
okay? You can have the conversation. Perhaps you don't want to deploy an ambulance, but now you know that a fall's happened. And if you do, we have a third party EMS, we have a third party emergency response center that can
Yep.
immediately get involved and sort of professionally deploy those types of resources very quickly.
Yeah, and so and I don't know the depth of the system, but I mean what I heard you say for the caregiver, I don't want to say call it certainty, but there's at least a comfort level that you can move throughout your day without that worrying feeling all the
Right.
time. So
Right.
you're gonna get an alert if something is needed, and you may get an alert to say everything's just fine too, which some people like
Right.
that. Nothing like a good pat on the back every now and then. So that's in. But how does this invisible tech? I mean, how does that invisible in the house, so to
Right.
speak? How does that actually measure? When there is an anomaly.
Right.
Does that
So
make sense?
there's
That's
it does. And that's kind of the beauty of the tech. And so on this GPU, we have machine learning models. So we have a lot of software. So this is really a software company, Wisdom, not a hardware company, right? So we're working with sort of off the shelf. I don't say off the shelf, but we're not inventing the technology for the hardware. We're using sort of established sensoring technology. We're building software, and the software is able to detect these different motions and movements that are of concern, right? So obviously if there's a fall, that's one thing, but also if someone is slowing down or is having problems over time, it'll start to look at the trends of
Yep.
movement activity. And that data is for the older adult and doesn't have to be shared, or it can be shared, right? So it's sort of, if you have a health watch and you look at your steps or you look at this or your, heart rate over time, how you're sleeping, we believe that those types of metrics are only getting more acceptable and more sought after in the general public. I don't know if you use a watch, but or something to sort of monitor, but like as we get older, we will sort of be more open and accepting and wanting that data, right, to help our health. So that's
Yep.
kind of how it works on the like for my mom. Like I know she wakes up around 8:30 in the morning and she goes down and she goes out and gets the paper. She comes back in and she has breakfast. So we have it, set that if there's no activity in the kitchen by 9, I will get an alert just saying, "Hey, there's no activity yet. You might want to check in, right?
Yep.
Make sure everything's okay." So you can set those sort of different
Yeah.
parameters throughout the day, and then we're building the system to get smarter. So when she goes to play her bridge game on Friday, there'll be a way to sense that the car's left, or that you start to learn the patterns, almost like if you had a person there, sort of observing and knowing, oh, it's Friday. She goes from 11 to 1, that the system gets smarter, and that's really the secret sauce.
Yeah, and that's a great illustration of because being involved with habits and routines and things like that. I think our older adults have really set habits that they've done
Mhm.
for years, and they're not bad. They get up, make a cup of coffee, maybe is the first thing they do. And so your example there hits home with me, is that if there's no activity in that kitchen for a certain period of time, then just send an alert. It doesn't necessarily
Mhm.
mean that you call an ambulance, but there's
Right.
something different about today, right? So
Right.
yeah, yeah,
And
that's
it's funny with the routines. I mean, what I've found really sort of working with and helping my mom since my father passed away is that her schedule and her routines conserves energy for her. Like having that sort of knowing when she's going to do what and sticking with that is kind of it's a strategy for getting through the day with maximizing the amount of energy she has and to know
Yep.
what she might want to do, right? So she is a very routine person, but I remember saying to her, like, "Come on, mom, like, let's mix it up," but I soon realized that that routine and habit is actually a really effective way to maintain energy.
Right. Right. And that's for all of us, actually. We can take a
Yeah.
lesson from that, right?
Right.
So, yeah, exactly. So the system is providing kind of autonomy. Uh, it also kind of, I think, in my opinion, it would build confidence both in the caregiver and the adult living in the home, right? Because
Right.
you know it's just a way that they're communicating without communicating, but it's the communicating on the things that they're just kind of table stakes, if you will, right?
Right, that matter. I mean, the system's
Yeah.
ambient, right? It's an ambient system. You don't have to do anything. Once it's in your you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to wear anything. You don't have to set anything. You don't like so that's the peace of mind there of not having to you don't have to obviously the older adult can pick up their phone and look at things on the app, but they don't have to, right? It doesn't require user interaction in order to be working 24 by 7, right? So it's ambient system, but at the same point, over time, it will start to just learn things. And as I said, that data, it stays in your home and you own that data. So it's not going to a large sort of data
Yeah.
center. It really is a private system. And that's what also is unique. And we heard loud and clear in our focus groups.
Yeah.
So that's also a really important part.
Yeah, and you said something, the stigma of the "I've fallen and I can't get up." That thing is that saying has been around for what, 20 years? And
Now, it's been around since the 80s, and
yeah, yeah. So
it's yeah, that
it's
company
yeah,
is still
that's time to
around.
end. I
Right.
mean, with all the
Yeah.
technology we have today, that's time to end because you can absolutely see the fault in that, right? There's so many challenges. I mean, maybe in the '80s it was a good idea, but it seems like now we've got to move on to these. And what I love about your system is that it is giving autonomy. It is giving a preference, right? If you want to stay in your home because there's either memories or habits or whatever,
Mhm.
this allows you to do so. So, do you have any feedback from either caregivers or somebody that's aging in their home today?
Yeah, I mean, just there's a point there's a lot of different conversations that happen, and I think if you just take a step back into, like, the age tech market and,
Yep.
if you're a baby, right, if you're a parent, you have, like, a toddler, right? You're looking at it's an infant to 6 months, 12 months, and it's a 2T, 3T, 4T junior. Between 0 and 10, there's, like, how many different stages of that you're segmenting, right, into something very specific. Um, the older the this is a huge wave. I mean, 70% of the gross domestic product for the United States by 2030 is going to be in the over 65 population.
Yeah. Yeah.
Advertisers, brands have missed the boat on how to talk to this demographic, right? And how to message and market to this demographic. It's a huge new business that's sort of emerging. But we're like, oh, you're over 65. The difference between these different ages. So from the caregiver side, we'll hear things like, I live alone and I'm just starting to feel vulnerable. Or
Yeah.
I'm a little worried when I get up at night. Sometimes I get a little dizzy on my way to the bathroom. Um, I worry when I'm about falling. I'm worried about not, getting help. So there's all these different vulnerabilities. From the families, for sure, they're stressed out and they want to do something. I think of wisdom, I grew up where there were times where I was bouncing around or station wagon with the panels with no seatbelt
Yeah.
on, right? I went to the beach with no sunscreen, right? So there is a point where just basic logical things changed in society, right? And people started taking measures to enhance their safety. And I really feel that having a type of technology or smart home, if it's available, why wouldn't you have it there,
Yeah.
right? Why would you say, oh, I could have had something that would really have helped me here. So I think you were going to see more people adopting,
Yeah.
this type of technology.
Yeah, it's great. And it's going to be such a great thing. And by the way, if I had it in my house now, I would have seen an anomaly because my daughter dropped a cat and it jumped
Oh,
on my desk. It
yeah.
went over there, and now my dog's going, "What is going on here?" So
I
I
know. My cat, yeah, always goes across the laptop and screws everything. I think cats are responsible
yeah,
for like, yeah, programming, but it does, yeah, it can tell because it uses the vision tech, the underlying vision technology. It knows a cat from a dog from a person.
yeah.
Where other systems, the cats are always setting off the motion detectors and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, excellent. Well, this is great stuff. I'm really excited about your company and what you're doing now.
Yeah,
this
thank
is
you.
it's what a great thing. You're doing something with purpose now, not just technology like we have done in our careers, but I mean
Right.
this has a significant purpose. It has a significant opportunity commercially, yes, but also just to change people's lives. So that's fantastic. But I'm curious a little bit about you. You are a busy mother. You're starting a business. What are the daily routines that Cathy has that keeps her healthy and happy?
Yeah. It's funny because starting a company has been such a great, I mean, I love it. I mean, but you're right. You have to come at it with a whole different type of attitude. And I think, um, more than ever, I've leaned into more habits and routines, which is funny, being on this podcast. But of course, my first habit is always getting a cup of coffee in the morning, and I do look forward to that moment during the day. But I get up early. I try to get up pretty early and just get my head clear in the morning, like a cup of coffee. It's quiet. You kind of clear out the things you need to do, and that's pretty common, right? Entrepreneur, because I really want to spend the day, on different. I want to be externally facing as much as possible. My co-founder is a computer science she's the
Yeah.
chief technology officer, and so she's really focused in on the product. So we split the business up a lot of sort of the
Yep.
technology, and then I'm really trying to get out in terms of the business side of wisdom. But I try to. I mean, I'm not a crazy workout person, but I do try to exercise. It's funny. I like to exercise at the end of the day. I'm not a morning exerciser. I
Yeah.
think it was because I always did I did sports growing up after
Yeah.
up through, and it was like you went to school and then you went to your practice and then you went
Yeah.
home, and sort of that works for me. So now that I have the
Yeah.
flexibility for being an entrepreneur, I try to build that into the afternoon or
Yeah.
take a walk. I have all my podcasts, that I like to listen to, but I also, eating wise, just try to um, I have my family has a history of diabetes. I had gestational diabetes with my pregnancies, and so like I have to be really careful to eat
Yep.
well, keep my energy level up, and things like that. So yeah, I'm pretty routine, but I can also be flexible, right? So like on a certain day, but not being on a plane every week as I have been in my past, and just keeping kind of regimented in terms of
Yep.
I think prioritizing. It's easy to get sucked into activities that take a lot of time that don't produce a lot of benefit. And
Exactly.
so
Yep.
I've tried to truly because you don't have sort of the noise coming in from a large company when you're working with a team. So it's like, what would actually move the needle today if I just did one thing and
Yep.
didn't get to any of the other things? Like, what would move the needle? So I do try to every day think of my needle moving activity that can just get us moving forward.
It's funny. I was out for a walk this morning with my dog, and I do that. That's part of my daily routine. Certainly when I'm not traveling. Well, even when I am traveling, I try to get out for a walk, just not a four-legged friend with me. But the
Yeah.
um, the interesting. I was thinking about this today. This actual topic, so it's kind of timely. Is that when you get asked to do something or something pops up that you think you need to go focus on, what we don't do a real good job of is understanding the cost of doing that
Mm.
relative to when the outcome is there, was it worth it, right? That falls into that priority bucket, and I use the Eisenhower matrix to try to get important and urgency
Mm.
right. But it's interesting because I think if we can start internalizing the cost of doing certain things and is the outcome worth it, then we have a different view on some of the things. And a lot of people just don't do that. They just start doing it, especially well, you're an
Right.
entrepreneur, you get pulled in thousands of directions. But if you're working for a company, if your boss asks you to do something, you tend to do it, right? And
Right.
we interrupt actually high value items. So I'm glad you mentioned that. That's a great exercise that you said, what is the one thing I need to get done? And you probably know why, because you've
Mhm.
categorized. your number one?
And it's funny, like since post-COVID and having been a chief revenue officer through COVID, that was very difficult because you and I are both customer driven, right?
Yeah.
I would say there's nothing more important in my day than having conversations with people and customers and older adults and getting feedback and hearing from the product. And sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I have so much to do. I don't, like I spent all day XYZ. But if I actually really prioritize it, there's nothing more important than having those conversations and listening and getting feedback and building those additional relationships. So that's hard to prioritize sometimes. But yeah, I do feel that's increasingly important. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, excellent. Well, Cathy, thank you so much for joining the show today. I really appreciate it. I think what you're doing is fantastic and important. If somebody wanted to pick up a conversation with you or your company, what's the best way they can find you?
Yeah, well, LinkedIn DM me, Cathy Minter, as always. I do check like almost all my DMs because it's a great way to reach me. Also, Cathy at mywisdom.io is my email. And you can always go on the website also and do a contact us form. We do check that out all the time. So please, I'd love to hear from people. Really like what you're doing, Michael. Also, it's great to reconnect and chat today. I really thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So great. And thank you everybody for tuning in. And if you do have questions, be sure to reach out to Cathy. I'm sure we're all in the same boat, we're similar boats, whether it's ourselves getting older or,
Yeah.
or our
Well, we'll
clients
be there. We'll all be there at some point. So yeah, I told you,
there's-
self-sustaining company. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So thank you so much, Cathy. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next Habit Architect. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks.